Hello everybody and welcome to Flowing with the Spiritual Cafe again, and here we have Alison, McCabe and Alexandra Isaievych, Mrs. Moss to me, and myself, Akushi Angel, and we are really excited to have Alexandra back again, third time. I just want to apologise because we had a broken link with the previous interview, which was absolutely amazing. So I know it's going to be amazing today. Just want to quickly say that Alexandra's here today to talk about her artwork and to talk about her journey in the I Ching and Gene Keys and the human design, and to share with you her new creation, she talked about in the last interview, Cafe Chat. And this is her, that's it. This is her Infinite Flow cards. I've ordered some. Mine they haven't arrived yet. I can't wait till they arrive. And I know they're going to be so helpful in helping me to work through the Gene Keys even more. You know, they're just going to be so useful. And her artwork's amazing. And so she's giving an offer today to all the listeners that are listening in. If they order the cards through Alexandra's website and put in the code, which is 5 angels, and I will post the website in the messenger in a moment. But let's just, for the moment, just welcome Alison, one of our co-hosts here. And hi, Alison. And let's take a moment, maybe to have a sip of water or tea or whatever it is, and take a moment just to settle ourselves today. I'm just going to read a very short poem. So let's just feel our feet on Mother Earth. Taking 3 slow, deep breaths into our belly and out through our mouth. Just take your time and just let go. Let go and just be here. Just maybe place your hand, either your right or your left or both hands, over your heart. And feel your heartbeat. Self-love. Once I was running from all that haunted me. To the dark I was succumbing, to what hurt unbearably, searching for the one thing that would set my sad soul free. In time I stumbled upon it, an inner calm and peace, and I saw I am beginning to see and to believe in who I am becoming and all I've yet to be. From Lang Larve. When you're ready, just breathe gently. Take one last deep breath into the belly and out through your mouth. And come back to the room. So I thought that would be really appropriate today, as we have Alexandra, who is going to be sharing in her own way, in her unique way, how we can start to love ourselves more. And so, Alison, if you'd like to introduce Alexandra. You're on mute, by the way.
I'd love to introduce her, but I don't have any script. So I must have missed that. But hello, Alexandra. We've met before. Amazing artist. And what I remember about you is this kind of remarkable journey of the left and right hemispheres of the brain that you've been working with, and this incredible journey of bringing through wisdom about the actual hexagrams, which I think for many of us in the gene keys, we don't actually know that much about the hexagrams, which are the origins. So yes, sorry, I don't have the script, so you'll have to do that bit, Akushi.
Well, on some level, that's perfect to just go into the best space there is. And we, in human language, we don't always have the best words, so we have to do the best we can. And the best word that we have is that space of nothingness, because it's out of the nothingness that everything emerges. That's the only thing that contains everything, because the moment we declare this, it becomes not that. So when we don't pick one thing, then everything is available, and it's the best place to be.
Perfect. And I just do want to say that I just want to read something that can introduce you a little bit, which is fearlessly stepping beyond the unknown. She helps you push through your buts and can'ts. And I'm scared on a road trip through parallel worlds. She helps you grow boldly, calling upon your truth to be loudly declared. And that's from your website. And so I'm going to let you carry on. I just wanted to say one other thing is that, you know, we're in Gene Key 43, and I had written down, I know that I know nothing. And so for you to come in with that is perfect. A perfect mirror.
And we are in this interesting time of the year as we're approaching the time of the shortest day. And my understanding, it's interesting that this comes up to my mind. I studied quite intensely folkloric traditions from the region I'm from. I grew up in Ukraine near the Carpathian Mountains, and the tendency then in the mountains, the ancient traditions are preserved the best, because all the invaders are, I guess, deterred by the mountains, so people get to preserve more of their way of being. And one of the understanding that survives in these places that are still in touch with the indigenous wisdom, that the veil between the worlds, between the realms, is the thinnest at this time of the year. And that's why what we do at this time of the year carries greater significance, because since the veil is thin, so thin, both things can happen. Whatever's on the other side of the veil has the opportunity of coming in. So we need to be mindful of these guests who are looking for an opportunity to come in. And then whichever way we carry ourselves, when the veil is that thin, when we stumble, we might end up in some other realms than where we would be during the times of the year when that veil is thick and keeps us in whatever dimensionality that we habitually reside in. So it's very, very exciting. This, and so what I'm also aware of is that when that veil is thin, even though on some level it might sound scary and dangerous, it's also the time of far greater wholeness, because that divider is almost non-existent. So the wholeness is available and possible and potentially present.
Wow. So are you talking about, when you're talking about the veil being thin, you're talking about sort of instant karma, you know, what we give out, we bring back. And so it's a really good opportunity to look at, we call it the shadow, or look at our ways of being. And if it's not serving us, then it's maybe time to really make an inquiry, contemplate it, and lift it into a higher vibration, or just sit with it. And if we don't, then it's just going to come back anyway. So it's a win-win situation because eventually we'll get it.
Yeah, it's an opportunity to be in relationship with whatever it is on the other side of the veil, because it's like we can almost touch it. It's that thin, that close at this time of the year.
Interesting.
I feel like I'd love to say something here because I've actually been researching a lot this week. There's going to be really important planetary movement this year at winter solstice, which is Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, which is a star of Bethlehem. And what I've been looking at is that Saturn and Jupiter moving together around the sun. So if you looked at them, so Saturn takes 30 years to orbit, Jupiter takes 12. If you look at that over a 60-year period, then these two planets draw a 5-pointed star, the same as Venus. And if you look at them over in 10-year blocks, they actually form a 6-pointed star. So there's this really phenomenal thing that's happening on the other side, this winter solstice, that to me really embodies like a feminine Christ consciousness. And it was one of the reasons I actually asked you about the hexagram 12, because this is, if you looked at it as a fire triangle coming into a water triangle as the sort of seal of Solomon, it feels like that hexagram may be connected. But just to say, I think like this year is like super powerful. What can happen between that veil? It's like really awesome. And given the year we've had as well, you know, it feels like we're being birthed through this bottleneck. I don't know if either of you perceive that at all.
Well, it's interesting that your attention is drawn to the hexagram 12 because traditional name for it is standstill. It's exactly that time to pause where seemingly nothing happens. And it's so easy to get frustrated and decide, oh my God, nothing happens, I'm stuck. Instead of recognizing, it's a pause, it's a beginning, it's an opportunity to cultivate, to germinate, to nurture, to be, and to start a new cycle.
And literally the sun does actually stand still for that time over the solstices. It doesn't move very much compared to normal.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's which I only realized actually going to the same sacred site in Wales every year, that this alignment can happen over a week because the sun doesn't actually move that much. so it's standing still.
That's also rationale for why is Christmas, which again is such an unfortunate name because the timing it is obviously non-Christian. It's kind of so sad that this holiday that, in my understanding, has nothing to do with Christianity, has a Christian name. It's super sad. So people misassociate it. But solstice is on the 21st, yet Christmas is on 25th. Because the sun stands still between the 21st and the 25th, and 25th is the first day it actually starts moving. So the day starts getting longer. So we are exiting the standstill, and that's what we're celebrating.
Fascinating. It's interesting, isn't it? Thanks for that, Alison. I've just learned something else. And this is why I love this Gene Keys or human and the human design and the planetaries and astrology and all of this. They all link up. Sacred geometry, it all links up somehow, somewhere. And it just reminds me of just how we are all so connected. And you know, the more I unravel myself, the more I listen to all these different conversations, the more connected I feel to all that is. And that's quite reassuring, you know, to know that we are connected, that we're just not this one being running around in this crazy world, but there are bigger influences there that really do the living intelligence that really does connect us all together and talks to us through all these different languages and these different modalities and symbolism, you know. So thank you, fascinating. So do we get to have a look at maybe the 12
Yes.
in your card?
So
There it
here's
is.
the
Oh
image.
yeah, I love
And
it.
it says attuning to each moment, because like to really attune to the moment, we do need to stop and smell the roses. So rather than complaining that, oh, nothing's moving, it's like, oh, that's our opportunity. And I made sure that on each image, I put the image of the hexagram itself. So it has 3 yin lines on the bottom and 3 yang lines on the top. And
Mhm.
for me, the hexagram is the map. There's so many human interpretations. I definitely have like 2 shelves worth of I Ching books, and plus the Gene Key book, which by itself is that thick. But before I go into reading anything, I look at the lines themselves. I look into how can I relate to this energy flow pattern energetically if I know, and we count the lines from bottom up. So the first line is yin. If the first engagement with this pattern is yin, is surrender, is from this place of receiving. And then the second place in the second step, which is relational in the second line, I'm also yin. It's like, okay, universe, whatever you bring. And then as I go in the third step, which is more experimental, playful, that's where human individuality starts to flourish. And it's also yin. It's also like, yeah, I'll play with whatever toys you give me. And then in the fourth line, in that community identity, it comes in solid. It's like, okay, here we go. And
Right.
then in the fifth line, which is this approaching this bigger picture consciousness, it's also young. It's also asserting what it is we know, what it is we stand for, what it is we're choosing to create. And then the sixth line has also that young perspective, that active creative impulse. And yet it's sitting on the foundation of yin. And we all know that if you're going to run a sprint or even a marathon or whatever it is you're going to run, you'd better get a strong start. In this hexagram, we don't have anything to push off from. We have the wait, receive, be with what is, even though you might be germinating all of these great creative ideas.
Mhm.
But on that yin foundation of receptivity, you just be with whatever it is.
Be with purity.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just imagining like going through all these hexagrams. Each one must be really exciting and fascinating, like a wormhole in itself.
Yes.
Was 12 an especially exciting one to reach because it is the yang over yin? It feels like kind of the energy of the times that we are going into, where the yin will kind of hold the yang rather than the yang being kind of out of control, which it feels like it has been, you know, in industrialization and globalization and just the sheer pace of our world that we've been living in.
Well, it's an interesting question. What is the exact imbalance in our modern civilization? Because we can all feel that something is imbalanced. We can all feel it. And a fairly conventional perspective is that it's the suppression of the feminine that has gotten us here. But I also have this perspective, which I'm very surprised that nobody else is talking about, because it's right there on the surface. And the way it's hiding in plain sight is one of the labels applied to contemporary civilization is materialistic. And it's right there in plain sight because matter means mother. So if anything, our civilization is of excessive feminine, of dishonored feminine, of kind of cancerous feminine, where the values of safety, security, and comfort, they're all feminine values, are way blown out of proportion. And there's virtually no breathing space for the masculine qualities of focus, dedication, service, taking care of the family, and creating safety for others. We and ourselves, we have kind of squeezed that out to the margins. And if anything, we have a severe deficiency of the masculine values and excess of dishonored feminine. And that brings us back to the I Ching. One of the ways I think that happens is if we go back to the yin and the yang, or the yang and the yin. The yang is the light and the yin is the dark. So, and the yang is the visible and the yin is the invisible. So at some point, I guess, as adolescent humanity, we started chasing after what we can see and lost our capacity to engage with the stuff we cannot see. So we don't know how to honor the feminine because we cannot see it, we cannot grasp it, we cannot understand it. It's that other side of the equation, the dark, the cold, the non-moving one.
Mm-hmm.
And our eyes are designed to discern movement because we were hunter-gatherers. We needed to be able to see the animals moving in the bushes. So our entire sensory apparatus is geared towards, like, can we eat it? Do we have to run from it? Will it eat us? So we don't see what doesn't move and what doesn't jump at us. And then we decide that it doesn't exist. And then we decide that our ancestors who did know how to honor the feminine, the invisible, that they were stupid, that they didn't know what they were doing, because the researcher go to the village and all the villagers are celebrating and welcoming the spirits, all 80 or 100 of them, and the researcher cannot see the spirits, and the researcher declares them crazy, even though all 80 of them can see the spirits and he cannot. And then he comes back and say, well, they're obviously an underdeveloped civilization because they worship these invisible things.
Wonderful. Thank you for bringing that balance in here. And, you know, it's very interesting what you're saying. And I can really resonate with this now in my life as I'm starting to become more strong in my own individual self, as I am becoming more balanced in my yin yang energies within, and by doing that, I've got more confidence and courage and strength and confidence to go out there in the world and parent my inner child that was very scared because I was so overprotected. And by being overprotected, we don't learn, or I didn't learn, to stand up strong in the world. So I'm starting to have to do some of those yang things. And by doing that and balancing it, I'm becoming softer in my feminine because I'm not fighting so much, because I'm in fear. And I get that it's a balance between those two energies. And I really love that you take it away from male, female. You still say masculine, feminine. And I get it that there are those expressions of those two energies, you know, the protector, and there's reasons for that. So yeah, I'm really, and I've been really contemplating on this recently because I have a new friend and he's very balanced in his yin yang energies, and it's been a bit of a, you know, challenge for me because as much as I don't want to play those games, those feminine games that we play with the male to sort of get them to maybe be the protector, they come in, they creep in a little bit when I get a bit relaxed, and he's not having any of that because he's not that he's aggressive about it, but he just stands strong in his energy. And I'm like, oh, I'm not used to this. So I have to come away and contemplate and let go and go in. And that's where I get my safety. So coming back to what you're saying, that's exactly where I get the strength, is to come in, go in, make that inquiry, look at why I'm being triggered and what's hurting me. And it's usually something there's layers, you know, and then I get back to my childhood, and then I let go of that, and it's painful, and yet I welcome it, because it might take a day or a week, but when I've come through it, I feel so light, and I've had the epiphany, and I understand. So, you know, I thank you, and thank you, Alison, for bringing that question in.
Yeah.
That's why I love having these conversations with you too. It's just so juicy, and
And it reminds me of one of the principles that comes right there in the I Ching cosmology, yin before yang. And again, back to the errors of our perception, because yang, it's the active and the bright and the light and the visible. We see it, and we don't see the invisible and the stagnant, the inactive. And yet for the action to happen, for a movement to happen, the space into which the movement can move into has to be there first. But we don't see it, we see the movement. So this principle of yin before yang is usually liberating. And that's where the hexagram 12 is about, is pause, take a breath, just allow things to be before you take action, rather than rush into action without actually orienting in that space, without aligning our own self. So it's like, oh, yin before yang, create space that will almost automatically generate movement. I've been attempting to learn various breathing practices, because breathing had been my weak spot throughout my life. And a lot of kind of conventional breathing practices are all like, breathe deeper, take a deeper breath. It's like, no, focus on your exhale. If you exhale fully, the inhale will happen automatically. You don't have to effort, you don't have to stress. Your system knows how to do it. Once you create the conditions where inhale makes sense, you just exhale deeply, let it all go, and your body knows how to breathe.
wonderful, Alexandra. I'm just wondering if maybe some of the listeners might want a card, one of their life's work or something reading out. How do you feel about that?
Just picking a card for our adventure today and see
Yeah, what do you feel about that?
Okay, let's pick one. Let's pick,
Okay.
because we could do the hexagram of the day, but
Yeah, but we could do that as well.
but I picked an interesting one.
Oh.
Picked the hexagram 28.
Oh, yeah.
And that one is known in Gene Keys as totality. And it's interesting. It's an interesting one. It's not one that I find an easy time to relate to. It has in one of my human design books, it's called The Player of the Game of Life. And the word I have in here is learning by immersion.
Immersion.
Yeah.
So going right into it.
So this is about taking things full on, really playing. And so I've been sitting with this one that didn't make any sense to me for a long time. And then I said, wait a moment, when we call it a game, then we know there are rules, and we know it's a bit of a pretend. So that's what allows us to go full on in, is because we know there are rules, and we know we're entering into this set of rules, and we're like, okay, I can play this. So it's actually a very helpful attitude to, rather than saying, oh, I don't know, saying, oh, no, I get it. It's a game, and that means it has rules, it has other players, and it means there is a timeout, and there is the pause in between the rounds, or whatever this particular game calls for. And then for me, the way I find comfort is I go to the hexagram itself. And I think this hexagram is a great outpicturing of exactly what we're talking about. So at the bottom, it's yin. So before you jump into the game, you stop, you pause, you're like, okay. You open to receiving whatever the vibes this particular place is sending you. And then you assert yourself, and then you say, oh yeah, I want to play, I have something to say, I'm willing to step forward. And then as you go up in the upper trigram, it's also, you start strong, you say, okay, I want to contribute, I'm going to go forward, I'm going to interact actively. But at the very, very top, you're listening to what is seeking to emerge. Because the only way you can really make a contribution is if you look like, okay, I'm not much of a sports person, but let's say we take a basketball as a game, because I know there's a basket. So that's what that top line, top yin line on top is. You look for where the basket is before you start tossing the ball. I mean, it doesn't matter what a brilliant ball thrower you are. If you're throwing it randomly every which direction, you aren't really going to progress in that particular game where the purpose is to get the ball into the basket. So that's what that upper trigram is about focusing your efforts so that your contribution reaches the recipient. You identify the recipient, and then you go strong in the direction of what it is that is calling for your particular kind of contribution.
Brilliant. And look at the artwork there. It's beautiful.
That's actually my Pearl and my IQ 28. So it's great that one came up. And I think it's really relevant to our conversation because like my experience of this gene key is that it's in the yin, it's in finding that sense of spaciousness and stillness that you actually perceive your immortality, like your connection to everything. And
yeah,
then
you connect both with the earth and with the heaven. You're open to receiving the totality of creation, both heaven and the earth. You're not fixated on either one.
Yeah, and the whole ancestral line of wisdom that arises like through our DNA as well is a really fascinating part, I think, of that immortality. Yeah, and then we have this linear part, which is much less able to perceive the bigger picture, but it's the one that takes it's the energy that takes the action. But yeah, I love that basketball thing, because there's been many times I've just completely directed things at the wrong place. Like I've been throwing the ball into the sky. Nothing's happening. And then you think, actually, and for me, the gene keys, people, society, this is where I found, and like the cafe right here, this is where I found I can really speak my authentic self, the wisdom I have, and all of that, and it all makes sense to the people here. But if I go and try and do it in other places, it's like the basket's not there, you know? So I do like that analogy. Very good, very wise.
One of the things, or one of my tests for whether the teaching is carries enough of wholeness for me to invest my time into is, and Richard's book certainly meets that criteria, is rather than just talking about evolution and evolutionary this, evolutionary that, there is understanding right from the top, from the beginning, that involution is just as important as evolution. So back to balancing the yin and the yang. And this might be a good entryway because prior to going live, we were talking like, how did I got started on this journey and this dive into the deep rabbit hole? And I started with a teacher named Dylan Newcomb. And he started out as a dancer and a choreographer and movement and music and energy psychology aficionado. And he invented a new, or co-created a new movement modality. And because it was so new and unlike anything else, he had to make up a completely new word for it. And the word is uzazu, and it's spelled U-Z-A-Z-U. And when I first started studying with him, he was the first person who brought my attention to this importance of balancing of evolution and involution, that there are two directions of movement and both are important. And he had a very simple definition for evolution, that evolution is movement from part to the whole, where we as a little self recognize there's a larger world out there and we aspire to connect with it. But involution is that movement from the whole to the part, where we start out at one with everything, and then we come into our individual body, into our individual consciousness, into our individual identity, and how both circles are happening at the same time. It's not like, oh, now we're in the involutionary phase and then we'll postpone involution for later. We aren't going to worry about it right now. It's like, no, we, just like in that hexagram 28, we need to be willing to receive from the greater wisdom of the universe. And then we can play this game as we listen to the earth and we listen to the greater wisdom from these larger dimensions that are not graspable with our minds. So when I started studying Uzazu, that's when I came back to the I Ching, because when I first picked up I Ching, maybe like 30 years ago at the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, I bought a set of I Ching cards actually, because they were 50% off and they were pretty, and I didn't quite know much about it, but I can't resist a good book at 50% off. And yet I was reading the little booklet that came with it that gave a condensed version of traditional Chinese poems accompanying each hexagram, and it didn't make any sense to me. So even though the cards were pretty, I set them aside, and I didn't get back to it until I got into Uzazu. And Dylan doesn't really teach I Ching front and center as front and center of Uzazu. Uzazu is primarily about breath and movement, and it used to be primarily about sound, but now he is teaching it from the perspective of how do we carry ourselves, our body, in space. How do we relate to self, and how do we relate to other, and how do we embody sensing, and how do we embody action. So the first round of Uzazu starts from understanding these two polarities. And then the third polarity on top of those two is about focus. Like, do we focus our efforts like this, like, do we find the basket in the basketball and make sure in the game of basketball and make sure we keep shooting for the basket and not randomly? Or do we cultivate awareness of the field as a whole? So it's in these three polarities that we have movements that reflect in an embodied way, or give us an opportunity to relate to these three polarity by simply how we orient our body in space, and the level of depth of wisdom that is available of becoming aware of that underlying matrix that can explain so much about how we're being in the world. Am I being focused when I need to be focused? And am I being out there in the world in a way that honors how I feel? Am I going through the entire fullness of the cycle, as opposed to, okay, I just threw my stuff out there and then I retreat back into my shell? It's like, no, I put my stuff out there, I tune into my audience, gather feedback. How do you feel? How's it going? Are you following? Are you enjoying? Where would you like us to go? And then I go into how I feel. And then I prepare my next round of contribution, but from that place of going within and really honor what I feel. So this is the level of depth of insight that opened up for me with Uzazu, and that's what gave me courage to delve back into the I Ching, because it's kind of a traditional way of relating to I Ching is through our minds, through reading all of these books, and I have 2 shelves worth of translations, and yet none of them are as helpful as this understanding of like, okay, yin, I go within, I go into sensing, I go into quiet. young, I go up, I go forward, I go up, I go active. It's like, oh, so if as I walk through each hexagram through understanding of those polarities, all of a sudden it's not that intimidating. I can actually relate to it. I can bring back together these different layers of being. Anytime we think that some layer of our being needs to be left out, like, oh, no, don't trust your body, it's just whatever. It's like, well, what good does it do to declare one part of ourselves non-welcome?
Well, I just think that's so exciting, like that you have used your body to explore, you know, these 64 different ways of combining yin and yang. And I feel quite inspired to go off and and look at them and move to them myself, because I mean, so much in our world we try and understand as knowledge, but it's so much deeper than knowledge. It's like the whole of creation. And so, of course, the body must be involved in that understanding. And then it's translated into creativity as well. I just think it's such a juicy, delicious journey, really. It's it's very refreshing to see how you've just embraced it on so many levels, creatively and through your whole being, not just through your mind.
And as I'm listening to you, it just allowed me to make the connection back to where we started, to that veil between different realms. How in traditional education, there are these not just veils, they're just like walls between different disciplines, thick walls. And I'm a prime example of that, because I got good education in that I had dance classes since I was little, and I had art classes since I was young, and my mind also got very good education. I was studying foreign languages, and yet they were all residing in their separate silos. I mean, forget veils, okay, rock hard walls between these disciplines. And yet, I mean, it's, I guess, useful that focus on one thing is useful, but it's possible to overdo it in like too much segregation between arts and sciences, between our bodies and our minds. So remembering that those veils can be, well, just like anything, we need to both connect, and then we might want to separate later, but that opportunity to bring together arts and sciences, movement and thinking and being and feeling, that we are a whole being that has all of these capacities. So remembering to that they are part of one greater whole, that they don't really exist in their separate silos. It's like, oh, good reminder.
Beautiful. I was looking at your bio before, and economic policy is what you studied, and I thought, oh, I'm going to check out what this is, and the different three parts to that. And I thought, wow, that is a clever girl, to study that to that degree. And here you are as a dancer, an artist, a visionary, and work with infinite flow cards. You work with the infinite, and how wonderful that you've integrated the two. And so, yes, as you were speaking, I'm thinking they're not separate, are they? It's the nothing it's the everything in the nothing, and nothing in everything. It's all part of one. And whichever way we come in at it, whether we come in from the intellect, I mean, intellect's one of my shadows in the gene key, precise and impeccability. And sometimes for me, and I mirror you in our gene keys. I have the 14 in my purpose, and you do in your life's work. And when I look at the shadow of compromise, and then I work through the competence in that, and I look at that as far as my intellect, and I can use the intellect to give me a say a runway, or to help me to get competent in some facts that then I can let go of and pull in from the source, but with a container there. That's what Richard calls it when he talks about the book, a container. And so, yeah, and I'm getting more and more, that the more we flow with that, but to have that as well, to have that container, it's like you're saying about throwing the ball in, having a direction, isn't it? You've got the net there, you've got the ball, you aim from it, you might miss, that's okay. You might miss because your arm's out in the wrong place or something else, because it gets subtle then, doesn't it? It gets intricate. But if you begin, but you at least with this goal in mind, you've got more chance of something coming back in the right direction than just throwing it up. And sometimes throwing it up and seeing what comes is also wonderful, because I've been in places in my life where I've just not known what to do. I've crashed, gone rock bottom, and I needed to move, so I've just thrown the ball out there, and something's come back. Now I have to say, though, I prefer it when I know where I'm throwing the ball, for sure.
Yeah, the value of that container, the value of that veil or whatever, that membrane that contains the container, it's very valuable. I learned from a Sufi teacher, that's where that concept of veil comes from, that it's our responsibility to veil our heart. Rather than saying, you hurt me, because we go out there open heart. Like, we don't blame winter for freezing our fingers when we forget our mittens at home.
Yeah.
We know there's winter out there, and that's why God created mittens. So we wear mittens.
Yeah.
So we veil our heart, because that's the essence of our being resides. But veil is permeable, so we can sense when it's appropriate to be open-hearted, and when it's appropriate to just keep our mittens on so that frost doesn't get them, doesn't get our fingers.
Yeah, that for me, I can resonate with that being a line 4, 2-4, and I watched that, having that understanding now. And this is why the I Ching, why infinite flow cards, why the work that you do, Gene Keys, is so powerful for me, is that it plays out in my life now. I have an awareness of it, in that something was said to me the other day that triggered me, and I had 2 ways to go. I could numb down, and so what I did was, I knew that it was hurting me. I didn't project out. I took care of my heart. I took some time to breathe into it and look at what it was, what the inquiry was for me. And then when I was ready, I came back out, and I didn't really need to discuss it with the person that had hurt me, because they were oblivious, really. It was my trigger. Whereas in the past, I may well have said, oh, you hurt me by saying that. There would have been a big conversation. They'd been like, what? And then they'd have gone into their defense, and it would just spiral down a black hole. So absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, the frost does not have anything personal against your fingers. It's just doing its thing, helping the plants to go to sleep in the winter so that they'll awaken fruitful and ready to blossom.
Just get some gloves.
Yes.
Okay. How are we doing here? How are we doing for time? We've got quite a few comments from our listeners. I just want to shout out again to the listeners, for those that have come on later, for all the listeners that are listening today and want to buy Alexandra's Infinite Flow cards. Show me your flow cards, Alexandra. They're amazing. I've got them on order. That if you order them through the website, and I've put it in the messenger here, the website is Infinite Flow Cards. If you go through the website, then Alexandra will give you a $5 discount for the listeners today. So, yeah, wonderful.
Yes, it's so exciting. I just got them from the printers on Monday, and it's like
It's a
it has been
Monday.
a long, long journey.
Yeah, how long has the journey been
So the
for?
creation of the images themselves, I made a commitment to create one per day, and they were done in the course of 3 months. Me and my collaborator, Svetlana, who wrote the poems for the back, she didn't even know we were going to do this. I told her I'm doing this, and she said, okay, I'll write some comments for each image that you create. So she agreed to hop with me on this train. And then as I continued creating images every day, her little comments started from 2 or 3 sentences, grew into these big poems, and eventually we condensed them together to just 3 stanzas for each poem. And the poem portray stories of empowered feminine archetypes,
Wow.
the various magical beings who go out into the world representing this particular energy. So she was writing the poems as I was creating the images, and the creation part was done in 3 months, but then putting them into this form took 3 years.
Long time.
And part of it, of course, I was not working on it full time because I guess I get excited and distracted and other stuff comes up, and then I'd come back and then would do another round of editing and another round of editing and another round of editing and then deal with technical glitches, and it's a journey.
Well done. Wow. Wonderful. I mean, your artwork is it's so unique. It's so interesting. Um, so colorful. I absolutely love it. Um,
And I think that also brings to, like, as I think about, okay, how was it done? So I have all of this study that I've been doing. I have Uzazu as the underpinning of me, my being able to relate to I Ching. I have a human design that I have been studying for a while. And then, of course, Gene Key is a beautiful teaching and beautiful community. And all of these realms, and especially in Uzazu and in Gene Keys, both of these areas of studies have most beautiful communities associated with them. There's something about being committed to study something that has this much depth that seems to bring out the best in people, or maybe also creates an opportunity for real depth of connection.
mm,
I think that there is this magic to it. So yes, there was a lot of study and staying with it and chewing on it and engaging with it, but also there is this, back to what we started from, involutionary nothing. I think ultimately the special skill I carry, and I don't know where it is in my chart, but this capacity to just open the veil, open the door, and allow something to come through. I love the Native American expression, being a hollow bone for the creator.
mm.
That somewhere on a deeper level, and I've been involved with arts my entire life from early on, somehow I got it that it has nothing to do with me. That my job is to let it happen. There is another discipline I studied for quite a while called biogeometry. It was an amazing architect from Egypt named Ibrahim Karim, and he integrated the level of business, interesting because there is also business aspect to it, but wisdom that he has integrated in the teaching of biogeometry. But one of his favorite sayings, and I love how he said, you know, when you study biogeometry, the highest position we can obtain in this field of study is that of a doorman. You stand by the door and you open it, and you allow the wisdom of the center, the wisdom of the universe, the wisdom of the divine to come through. That's all you do. You just open the door. You don't need to figure anything out. You don't need to say, oh, we need 10 milligrams of that and 100 milligrams of that. And then you don't need to figure out any of that out. You just open the door and allow this wisdom to come in and harmonize whatever needs to be harmonized. And it might be different from moment to moment to moment. You just stand there by the door and open it when needed and close it when not needed. Veil your heart when you go out there into cold winter weather. And just be there, aware of what's needed in the moment, and open the door.
Yeah, that's a really fascinating way of looking at it. And I'm just wondering about, where the sun's transiting today. If we think of, like, you've just got the cards back after this long journey of being with them. And today we had this planned a while, didn't we? But this is like maybe a first public launching. So
yes,
what can the transit today tell us about this important point in the journey, which I'm sure is just another beginning?
Yeah, yes, it is just another beginning. And the hexagram number is 43. And here it is. Honor not knowing to foster sudden insight. And again, I always go to the hexagram itself, and it's open up on top to receive that insight from the greater wisdom of the universe. And the rest of it is standing strong in that young, active energy, being front and center and up and active, and yet listening to the will of heavens, looking for where is that basket that the game of life is inviting me to play into. And it's exactly that opening that allows for a contribution to happen, for insights to come in, for a breakthrough to happen. And also when we look at, in both human design and the I Ching, we look at the opposite side of the equation. We look at the programming partner. We look at where is the earth. And it's in the hexagram 23, which is the exact opposite. It's 5 yin lines. That's what defines programming partners in Gene Keys, is that for every place where there is yang line, okay, look at this one, there is a programming partner has a yin line. So the first line is yang, the first line will be yin in the programming. So that simplicity and expressing core essence comes from this total acceptance of yin, and yet at the very highest level, there's the assertive energy of yang saying, okay, this is where we're going. This is what we are creating. But it comes from this place of acceptance and listening and being with what is.
Beautiful.
So it's kind of like you're listening to the will of heaven, but you're using your own will to put what you hear into action.
Yes. Yeah. You're simultaneously, both circles of energies are running. The involutionary, you have incarnated into this dimension. And then evolutionary, once you come in, you aspire to evolve and connect and contribute. And yet it's important that in the process you come back to yourself and honor what it is, your little self, where it is at today, that we don't go out there and try to contribute from a place of being frazzled and overwhelmed and hectic and exhausted, but we come back, we nurture ourselves, we receive the gifts that are given to us, and we serve from this place of our cup overflows and it nourishes the world around us.
I'm just posting the website on the messenger while you're talking. I've just been requested, so I'm just concentrating on that. Alexandra, the artwork in the cards, it's beautiful, as I said. How did that come about into each card? Because they're unusual.
This is exactly what got me to talk about this being hollow bone for creator. is that I would put several hours of study each day as I was engaging with each pattern. I had all of my favorite books with me, and I was traveling quite a bit during the time. So it meant, luckily, I have Kindle editions of some of these books so that they can be hide in this minuscule electronic form. But then I would just start drawing and I would let it happen. And if you go on my Instagram account, which is also Insightful Color, you'd have to scroll quite a bit down because I was doing the drawings back in 2017. I actually captured some time-lapse recordings, I think only 4 or 5, because it takes something to keep the camera in that exact position and to keep drawing in that exact position, of just allowing it to flow through me and to just draw from this unconscious inspiration. But there is the other side, which I do manage consciously, and that is one of the traditional ways that I Ching is made relatable is by looking at the trigrams. And each one of the trigrams is traditionally associated with one of the elements: fire and water, wind and thunder, lake and mountain, and of course, heaven and earth. So these are the traditional building blocks of hexagrams, because hexagrams are an attempt to reflect or to relate to a 6-dimensional universe. And our bodies and our brains are not really hooked up to operate with awareness of the 6 dimensions. So the easiest way to relate to the 6 is to split it in 2 and have 2 trigrams. To have a lower trigram and an upper trigram, and then, so in this season that we have just entered, the lower trigram is heaven. We are connecting with heaven, with yang, with creative spirit, creative impulse energy at this time of the year. And then as the sequence progresses, the upper trigram evolves and shifts. So we were just in hexagram 1 a couple of days ago, where it was all yang lines. And now if we go to the 43, the top line is yin. And then it will progress, that yin line will progress through the every 5.5 days as we enter the next hexagram. I believe the next one we enter is 14, where the yin line is in the position 5. And that's when my birthday is. And that's the geometry of it. So contemplating the elements is a time-tested way to relate to each hexagram. And for the 43, the upper trigram is lake. So when you think about it, what creates lake? So if you look at just at the trigram, thick, impenetrable bottom, 2 solid yang lines, so the water doesn't seep in. Otherwise, you'll have no lake, you'll have a bog. So that solidity of the bottom, and yet that openness. I mean, lake is the ultimate container. It contains a lot of water. It has this energy of fullness. If I were to express lake in one word, of possibility of contribution, satisfaction, of being strong out in the world, and having one's strong arms wrapped around whatever it is we are here to create. So that's one way. And as me and Svetlana, my amazing collaborator and co-author, were contemplating, okay, how do we help people to relate to these images? We have created a new piece of work, which currently exists only as a digital download, called The Elements of Life, where we have just taken the 8 hexagrams that have to do like double lake or double thunder, and included those poems and included some guided exercises. And now we're collaborating with a musician in Australia who is creating, Svetlana is writing the text, my husband is narrating the affirmations, and our musician friend in Australia, Roman Korchev, is creating music to contemplate each one of these 8 elements. And the first one, Roman just texted me last night that he is uploading it to be available. And I'm like, send me the link, send me the link. I don't have it yet. but the first one is ecstatic fire. And we invite listeners to contemplate, how does it feel to be at one with the element of fire, to embody the qualities of that force of nature. So that's coming. We have this workbook that currently is only available to the listeners who participate in this telesummit that Svetlana got invited to speak at Confident Creative Academies. So the people who listen to Svetlana's contribution to this telesummit receive a free download of this workbook, but we will make it available in the printed version. And I created 2 coloring pages where I took 2 of my drawings and converted them to line drawing. That was a lot of work, so I don't know that I'll be able to do it for all images, but I created one for hexagram 2 and for hexagram 29 coloring pages that come as part of that workbook. It's called Elements of Life. And the printed version will be coming in I don't know if in a couple of weeks, given how much work it is to create a printed piece, maybe in a couple of months. But for now, listeners to Confident Creative Academy get to receive it for free just by participating and listening to. There's a whole bunch of teachers teaching creatives of how to be better business people. And I certainly need that, because that's very daunting for me. I'm like, okay, now I have all of these cards. Now what do I do? It's a little bit, even though I studied economic policy, I worked as a management consultant for a little while. I could go in and help people develop market strategy. And for my own work, something is very tender, and I guess there's a desire to keep it not just veiled, but swaddled and close.
Oh yeah. Well, we're helping you here to unswaddle and share because it's absolutely amazing. So honoured, always. I love you so much, Alexandra. I just, would like to say maybe Alison's got some more questions, but what I would like to ask before we start closing up is, how would you recommend using infinite flow cards? And I love the name infinite flow cards, and I get it now. This is how they came in.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much for getting it. And I think the simplest way with any set of cards, which is, well, maybe I'll backtrack for a little bit. One of my absolutely favorite principles in life, in philosophically, is your greatest weakness is your greatest strength. And the opposite is also true. And one of my other teachers, he likes to say, he says, it's the promise. It's not maybe, perhaps, kinda. He says, no, your greatest weakness shall be your greatest strength. Straight out of Gene Keys, we embrace the shadow to unlock the gift. Mm-hmm. So the greatest weakness of the cards for me is very often I want a specific number of hexagram, and I'm like shuffling frantically. It's like, where is that specific number? So that's the greatest weakness. But the greatest strength of the cards, that's why they're published as cards, you just shuffle them, you pick one. I'll pick another one for us right now and see what's here to learn right now. Hexagram number 6, peace. Patiently balancing harmonious exchange. It's like, because the shadow is conflict.
Yeah.
And to recognize, there's conflict out there. Because let's look what's happening on the bottom. There's yin, right? I'm looking, okay, what's happening here? And then the second line is yang. I'm going to assert myself. I'm going to say, okay, this is where we stand. This is what we're going to do. And then the third line, I'm like, okay, let's see what happens. And then up on top, I'm holding headstrong. It's like, okay, here we come. I'm going to be out there doing things. Of course, it's going to create conflict. But how am I going to create peace? I'm going to stay strong in my values. And I'm going to listen, to be soft on the earth. And in that third line, I'm going to be willing to receive feedback. And again, right there on top, remain strong in my conviction, in my faith, in my commitment to community, in my commitment to taking action out in the world. That's how I'm going to create peace. And I do have this one fairly prominent in my profile. And it always works. Pick a random card. And then my advice for me is look at the hexagrams. That's why we're repeating it 3 times. It's right here and it's right there in nice big image. And then read the poem, see if the being speaks to you. This particular being is called the guardian of connection. And this is what we're doing right now. We're connecting with each other. We're connecting with our listeners. So it always works. Just pick a random card,
Beautiful.
look at the colors, look at the words, look at the yin and the yang lines. If they speak to you, there are a lot of people who study I Ching who never bother was figuring out this little glyph. But for me, I feel that that's where the vibrational quality comes through. And something which, again, I wish it said nearly in every mention of I Ching, but nobody says that it's a binary code. Just like our computers run on zeros and ones, it's pretty obvious that 0 is yin and 1 is yang. So our computers are an outpicturing of that core principle in the I Ching, that everything in the manifest universe can be expressed through sequences of zeros and ones. And here we go. Those zeros and ones are running somewhere in the background behind our conversations, creating this miracle of being together across time zones.
It's very interesting 6 has come up because just to let the listeners know as well that next week we've got a conversation about gender transformation, and it feels like this conversation really sets a sort of scene from the almost from the deepest biology and the creation of life, the building blocks of life, which are these DNA codes, the yin and the yang, that are expressed through the hexagrams, and then how in each generation, in different cultures, we express this. It's just so fascinating, and so just that made me remember next week as well. And some of the thoughts you've had about what you said about the masculine, how that energy, there's actually a shortage of that in the world, and I really see that. And so that was a really fascinating insight. And so, yeah, if you just have any last thoughts on, you know, how you, having gone through this journey, how do you perceive gender transformation in our world at the moment? Is it important, or?
I think what's important, there are 2 things that are very important in this, from this perspective of 6-dimensional reality that I Ching gives us a glimpse of, is wholeness and polarity. Is that each one of us has access to all 64 gene keys, 64 codons. We might have proclivity for some of them, or we tend to lean on some of them, but each one of us has access to every single one of them. So just saying that, oh, because I'm a man or because I'm a woman, I have no access to this other way of being, I think partially this gender amorphousness is a response to that. We're sick and tired of somebody telling us, oh, don't be too upset, don't be too excited, don't be too passive, don't be too aggressive, don't be too much this, don't be too much that. We're all looking, how can I explore the fullness of being? And the only way to explore the fullness of being is, instead of hanging out in this gray middle that says don't be too much of this and don't be too much of that, is to be willing to go to the extreme and to be willing to go all the way out and shout and scream and jump up and down and run like a crazy maniac, and then take a break and rest and be quiet and soft. And that's where I feel the I Ching is so fabulous, because it's a map. And if I have a map, I feel a lot more secure going out to the edge, because I know how to come back and I know how the other side looks like. That's what attracted me to Uzazu. I saw Dylan giving a presentation, and his capacity, of course, he was also coming from a background as a performing artist, at will to step into ways of being that were not accessible to me. And I was like, whoa, I need to explore that. And then what I discovered as soon as I started studying Uzazu, that I was always hedging my bets, that my yeses were not full on yeses and my no's were not full on no's. And I'm like, oh, no wonder. Because I'm told by people who know how batteries work is that in a battery, the greater is the difference between the plus and the minus, the greater energy potential in the battery. And that when the difference between the plus and the minus goes to zero, then there's no energy left. It's like, oh, no wonder I've had over a decade of chronic fatigue-like way of being in the world, because I was listening to all these people who were saying, don't be too much of this and don't be too much of that. And I think especially as women, nearly, I jokingly tell to my husband, I'm saying, like, have you ever met a woman who had not been told that she is too much? Somehow there is this imprint that if you're a female, you shouldn't be too much. So of course, like, screw those gender norms, let me be too much, or whatever it is that the universe is telling me to be. Maybe I shouldn't be dumping all of this excitement onto my husband in this particular moment, but let me be with all of it. And that's where setting gender norms aside, because on some level, I think the gender norms emerged in response to recognition that each one of us has a fluidity of being. I think that's why the society responded with such a strict code of how we nurture girls or how we nurture boys. Exactly because at our essence, we're so fluid. So the society took upon itself to teach us, to put us into those containers, which on some level, some of those containers are really helpful and really work. So I think in the previous conversations, we got started on my favorite thing to talk about, which is Argentine tango. That's a perfect container in which to explore the polarity and practice going full on out into full on yin and full on yang every single step, both partners. So traditionally in Argentina, it was not called leading and following. It was called the man's role and the woman's role. And everybody started in the woman's role. That's how it was traditionally taught. You learn first by being receptive. You listen to the creative impulse emanating from the leader. But then as a follower, I have to take that in, right? I start out yin. But then my job is to make it big and beautiful, to go out on a limb, make a huge step and commit to it, and communicate to my partner, to my leader, loud and clear, this is what I'm choosing to create with what you have given me. If I don't step into full on yang after being full on yin and having received the impulse, if I am wishy-washy and I'm like, no, which way should I put my foot? He can't do anything with that. It totally cuts off his opportunity to create a beautiful choreography. I have to take what he's giving me and make it big and really commit, make it big and beautiful, communicate loud and clear to him. And then his job is to follow the follower, to accompany my response and to listen to be full on yin, to listen. You're no leader unless you're listening to your follower. You're a tyrant if you're not listening to your follower, and nobody will want to dance with you. Because why do I want to dance with you? Because you listen, you appreciate what I'm creating with what you're giving to me. You feel honored by my expression, my outpicturing of your creative impulse. And being a leader is very, very vulnerable. And yet I tell beginner leaders, nobody's looking at you. Everybody's looking at her. But she can't do what she is doing without the leader's contribution. And one of my tango teachers said, leader's job is to do nothing and do it well. Because it's all about the follower. You're no leader unless you have a follower. And how you look on the dance floor is almost entirely determined by the skill level and capacity of your follower. Doesn't matter what the skill leader you are, but if your follower is not as or more brilliant, then it won't look like much. So there's this very strict container. In tango, there is a very strict code of conduct of what we do, how we do, what we don't do. And yet the freedom that's available, including the tradition of men dancing with men, that's right there in the DNA of tango. And women probably danced with women traditionally as well, because nobody knows how traditionally the women learned, because that happened outside the public eye. So there is this, again, seemingly very strict container with a strict code of conduct that gives so much freedom and access to this way of being that almost no other activity in the modern life gives access to. Like in tango, bring in your excitement, your joy, and your hatred, your resentment, all of it. That will allow you to create a beautiful dance. If you recognize, like, oh my God, I so appreciate this person I'm dancing with, and I'm hating his guts, and I'm going to put all of that into what we're co-creating and make it big and beautiful.
And that is passion.
From that maximum yin and maximum yang, and willingness to go to both extremes every single step along the way. Because I complete my step, I make it young, I make it super assertive, and then I listen and I wait. And part of the good following skills is I wait for however long I need to wait. I create space for my leader's creativity to flourish in that spaciousness and softness and receptivity that I bring to the dance.
Wow. Phoebe, I've just caught Phoebe Salter's message here. There's quite a few messages, so if you pop into the cafe and respond to some, that would be beautiful. But I've just caught Phoebe's, which says, my out picturing of your creative impulse. I love that, Alexandra. And we have absolutely loved you being here, and your cards and your totality and expression and fluidity of explaining the I Ching and the Gene Keys and human design and the infinite flow cards, it's been and it is absolutely, yeah, let's have an infinite flow card here. And I can see now when we look at the pictures, that's what they are doing, aren't they? They're just doing all this, just flowing. So absolutely lovely. I want to just say thank you to Tamara, who always looks after the Facebook side for me. When I'm coming on, she just stays there quietly looking at the and taking care of Facebook, just in case we're a little bit late when we're doing the technology. She's just there just in case, something happens, so she can say, they are coming on, just have to wait a little bit. So thank you, Tamara, for that. And thank you to all the listeners. And don't forget to sign into insightfulcards.com. I've put it on insightfulcolor.com, and then you will get the discount. If you want to know what the discount code is, just text me and I'll tell you, because it is just for the listeners today. I have already told you. And you get $5 discount for Alexandra's cards. And I'm waiting for mine. I can't wait for mine. Alison, thank you for your brilliant questions. I loved listening and knowing about the different planetary frequencies and involvement there. Alexandra, I love you. You just light me up. I light you up. You light me up. It's just wonderful. And of course, next week we have Alison talking about sacred unity. Is it, Alison? Is that the conversation? Is it next week? You're on mute.
Yeah, we're going to talk about sacred union, so alchemical union of female, but also how that translates outwards. And it's a conversation among the holy hosts, really, about our own journey of gender, sexuality, transforming times. So it should be a really interesting conversation.
Yeah, Yeah, it's definitely such a relevant conversation for our times. Like we can no longer hang out in that gray middle and be always tired because we're told don't do this, don't do that, don't be too much. Enough of that.
Enough, enough is enough. Yeah, so let's be in our passion, be in our creativity, in our yin and our yang. We need both of them, absolutely both of them, yin and yang. And for everybody that's listening, get those cards.
Go out
Uh,
there and dance.
oh, and the other thing, yeah, get the card. International creativity. Oh, what was it? What is the for
Confident
the
Creative Academy is what
that's
Anna's participating in, and she'll be giving a talk on November 24th
November the
about
24th.
our work, and then the guided meditations, the sound attunements that our wonderful collaborator in Australia, Roman Korchev, is creating. The first one's supposed to be out sometime this week. And I don't have the link yet. I just literally got a message from him last night that he's about to upload it, to embody the energy of ecstatic fire. That's the first
Oh,
one.
well, I'm a line eight. I'm a gene key eight. So ecstatic is what I am and what I love. So thank you again. Please pop in the cafe and all those links and bits of information for our listeners. Just pop them in there so they can, see what's happening to you. Go to Alexandra's website. I go in it. It's just a beautiful website just to look at and look at her artwork and her colleague as well. And your colleague's name is,
Svetlana.
sorry?
Svetlana. It means light.
Lights, Svetlana.
Light. Svetlana. Yes.
Lana.
Svetlo. Light.
Svetlana. Yeah. And so blessings to everybody. And we'll see you next week. And thank you for joining us.
Yes, my great pleasure. Thank you for this amazing, magical space you create, and for beautiful dialogue. It was really like listening and being in a space of co-creation is such a gift. I feel so blessed.
I love you. Thank you, Alexandra. Thank you, Alison.